see about 94% total coverage. However, if you want to go down to Nashville, Tennessee, or St. Louis, or anywhere kind of within like maybe a 50-mile path along, or corridor along the eclipse path, you'll be able to see virtually all of it. And the line kind of crosses the country from Seattle down through South Carolina on a bit of a curve, and I'll show you that on the next slide. From start to finish, it's going to be about an hour and 46 minutes from the time that it starts in the U.S. until the time that it finishes. However, when it passes over our area, the whole thing lasts about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you're going to take pictures of it, you've got a very small window to get it done. This may be a repeat for a lot of you, but obviously don't look at the sun. Definitely don't look at the sun during an eclipse. There's this bright part around the outside called the corona that is absolutely blinding. So use your approved solar viewing glasses. Was there a question back there? Sorry. I guess I'm seeing things. Use approved solar viewing glasses for yourself and also for your camera, because camera lenses basically acts like a magnifying glass for your camera sensor and it'll burn a hole right through it. Those things are expensive. So to combat that, some people say that you can use just a basic 10-stop neutral density filter that you can buy on Amazon for 50 bucks. Some people say no, that's not nearly enough, and you need something that darkens light around 18 stops. So that's like 100,000 times less light than what you can see with the naked eye. Again, you can have these things for around $50, I want to say. Not terribly expensive, but definitely a lot less expensive than a new camera sensor. Alright, so here we'll kind of finish things up tonight, and I'll show you a few examples of work that I've done over the years. This was the first picture I ever took of the night sky, actually with a very old Nikon point-and-shoot camera. It's a cool Pix model, in fact. I don't even think it had focus controls or anything like that on it. But I took that my freshman year of college just at my parents' backyard. I got the moon over a horse pasture and a few stars. This was the moon. I shot that actually shooting through a telescope one night. It's a Celestron. It was a Celestron C90 scope. And that exposure was around a 50th of a second, and the aperture on that scope was around f11, so not a terribly bright one, not a terribly complicated setup. And a lot of people can do the same thing using a cell phone now. There's a bit of shameless self-promotion. I actually used to own this car up until about 8 months ago, and then I had to buy one for the wife and little baby. So, story of every man, right? Yeah. There's some star trails up in the sky, and they kind of show up well in the hood. I cry a little bit. But anyway, this tree is Indiana's certified largest chinkapin oak. It only sits about 6 miles west of town on a farmer's property. It's probably a national record, but evidently there's supposed to be some money put up for that kind of certification. And they've also got to enter a certain amount of that land in some kind of a protection program. So the farmer said, well, Indiana's biggest, good enough for me. So it measures 122 foot tall and 147 foot wide in the crown, and the trunk itself is 7 foot in diameter.
So you've got a camera on a tripod?
Yes, yeah.
And that's just a 10-second exposure
right there? This one right here actually was, I think, around a minute and a half. Yeah.
And about what time did it? So this is after sunset?
Yeah, this was taken at night. There was a full moon rising off on the western horizon, or on the eastern horizon. So that's why the sky looks like it's shot in daylight, and you can see the stars. That's actually a trick you can do. It's kind of neat. If you shoot the landscape under a full moon, you can get stars and really good landscape detail. It's kind of a neat effect. This next one was shot down at the Shieldstown Covered Bridge back when it still had siding on it. And that tree was actually taken down about 3 days after I took that shot. So,
and so that tree is lit up by just ambient light?
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
So the area around the campsite's actually got quite a bit of security lights, so you've got to all those cabins in there just produce an awful lot of light pollution whenever you're.
And about how long is the exposure on that one? At the guess.
That was two exposures. I think I did tracked 2 minutes and 30 seconds for the sky, and the foreground was probably around 30 seconds, I'm guessing. Here we have a phenomenon called zodiacal light, which is where you get dust and debris and whatnot that's on the plane of the solar system that appears to kind of shoot up from the horizon along the ecliptic, which is where you see planets. It's not really visible most of the year here in Jackson County just because we have so much light pollution, but on this night it was really bright. And you've got it here coming up out of the Sugar Maple, the Robertson Cemetery, coming up through the Pleiades and the Hyades, and before it fades off into the upper left. This is my house, farmer's tractor. Nothing particularly fancy about the sky here, I suppose. This was taken on my front porch. I'm not a full moon rose. This is a multiple exposure. I shot the moon, I think at around 300 millimeters focal length, 1/500th of a second, ISO 200. The sky and the foreground were shot with a 14 millimeter lens, I think at around 15 seconds. And those little green dots you see are fireflies. This shot was actually sort of from a dream that I had many years ago that I just kind of composed back in August of 2015 during the Perseid meteor shower. Not going into the details of the dream, I suppose. The long and short of it was there was a guy trying to walk into the center of the Milky Way. I don't know what it was about. Maybe I drank too much that night. It was a weird dream. But anyway, I kind of remembered that one night and went out to recreate it. And I got lucky in the shot because a Perseid meteor decided to streak down through the frame. And I don't think I could have prayed for that to happen again. The blurring of the foreground was all done digitally. And I think this may have been taken the same night, but this is over Indian Creek, just a little bit east of where I live. And there's a gibbous moon that's setting on the horizon, and the Milky Way's kind of coming up over the ditch. If you've seen this one before, I think it was featured on the news one night, and it also used to hang in the Java joint for quite a while. Currently it's on display over at Dee's Diner, I think.
So that's multiple overlaid images also?
No, that's a single exposure.
Right.
Yep. Most of these that I'm showing you are going to be single exposures tonight.
So I could do that?
Yeah, that'd be real easy to do. Yeah. That one, I think I had the camera ISO set at 4,000, 14 millimeters f2.8, 30 seconds. Yep. So that one's pretty straightforward. And I want to say total processing time to bring out shadow detail couldn't have been more than 15 minutes.
And how do you frame, so it's dark, how do you frame it?
Well, with that lens, the aperture isn't bright enough to frame it visually, so you just kind of have to halfway line things up and then take an exposure, make an adjustment until you're happy with it.
See your pants.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, a lot of trial and error for that part. I've actually only got one lens that's really good for composing in the dark, but the results that it produces wide open almost prohibit its use from shooting wide open. It's a 24 millimeter lens made by a Korean company called Samyang.
So give me an idea. So you how many exposures did you make before you picked out that one?
I think 5.
That's it?
Yep.
Huh.
Yep. Well, the 14 millimeter lens, which is what I shot that one with, it's really easy to compose. You have such a wide field of view. You can usually find some way to position something in there that makes for a good composure. So like in this case, I've got the Milky Way running roughly 1/3 through the left of the frame, and then the horizon, a little bit more than 1/3 up. Here's another picture from Schneider's nursery. It's a bit lighter than this in person, but this is another Perseid meteor shot with the Milky Way kind of over the trees. This one I get a lot of feedback on. This image was shot in the Shieldstown area, kind of where Indian Creek comes into the river. Actually, for those of you who are in local history, there used to be a ferry operated at this site. operated by the Robertsons and the Hamiltons, which settled the Honeytown Bottoms originally. But anyway, on this night, there was a farmer who was out there running a grain truck and a combine or something, and his headlights kept sweeping across the river, and so I waited for him to make a turn at an end road to light up my scene, and posed my shot. And
so go up there and show us. So the lower parts of the trees are lit up by the farmer's truck?
Yeah, and a combine.
And a combine.
Yep. The moon's in the shot too.
Yes, I see that.
Yeah, and that one was actually shot with a 300mm lens and pasted into the image.
Yeah,
I know. Well, there is such a thing as too great of a dynamic range. So sometimes you got to get creative whenever you want to make the composition that you want. But at any rate, now this one was shot, I think it would have been like the middle of August 2015.
facing south?
Southwest at this point, yeah. That orange glow on the horizon is from Bedford, Indiana. And then something that's kind of fun to do but not always practical to do is to include people in your shot. And actually this morning was really cold. My father and my brother and I went out deer hunting one day in November 2015, and I asked them to hold still for about 10 seconds, and while I shot them with the constellation Orion over that woods in the distance. It doesn't show up very well in this slide, it's just really undersaturated, but yeah, that's one of my favorite shots. Here's kind of an example of a deep sky image shot with a DSLR. I want to say this one was around half an hour or so worth of exposure time, and it's Comet Lovejoy next to the star Cooper Genus. This was visible around New Year's 2015. Here we've got the moon coming up through a sycamore tree. Actually, Mary Elizabeth's daughter Ann messaged me on Facebook that night saying to look at the moon, and I happened to glance out my computer window, and I said, well, I'm about to get this one, I guess. This image was featured in Indiana Outdoor Magazine just this year. Shot on some property that's been in my family for probably 100 years now. It's currently owned by the ag teacher at the high school. What you've got here is just an old farm pond with a silver maple that's leaning out over it, and up in the sky you've got the winter band of the Milky Way, and then the constellation Orion with some associated nebulosity. So the brightest parts of this image you could roughly see with the naked eye. The darkest parts of the image up around Orion were about 13 times fainter than what you could see by yourself.
Is that one shot deal?
No, oh no. Oh my gosh, no. This one is actually, the format's not of a panorama, but this was shot with a 24mm lens, makes up about 12 frames to get the sky. And then separately, I went back and shot Orion over the course of about 45 minutes with a 40mm lens at about f2.8. And then just digitally recombined them. Yeah, it was a lot of work. This is a single exposure. Just taken over a field just in the Honeytown Bottoms. My poor old truck makes a cameo in this shot. The moon's lighting the clouds, and that's the Milky Way kind of arching over everything. For those of you who are into flowers, there's a bunch of dead nettle that's blooming in this scene. It's the purple areas.
How long was that exposure?
This one was shot, let's see, it was, I want to say ISO 12,800, 5 seconds, f2.8, with the 14mm lens. Just a single exposure taken on Lake Ditch. The brightest star of the night sky Sirius is kind of sitting over that dead cottonwood in the distance, and then there's some yellow rocket that's blooming on the ditch bank there. I thought kind of having the dead trees with the blooming flowers was sort of a nice contrast. This is last year's Perseid meteor shower. I got up way too early and didn't get much of a payoff for it. I think I was out there shooting on this old iron bridge on a farmer's lane for, I don't know, maybe 3 hours. And I because of cloud cover, I got exactly 3 meteors. Yeah, and they all happen to be in the spring, so. Yeah, they all came through just maybe half an hour or so before dawn started. Sort of a similar composition to the one I showed you earlier. This was shot again where Indian Creek comes into the White River. And this one uses a different kind of technique. It's called noise stacking, where I shot this one at, let's see, ISO 3200 over 20 seconds roughly, but I used 8 different frames and then aligned them and averaged them for noise in Photoshop. And so what you wind up with here is this really clean image that prints well in case anyone's interested. So this one was just shot last October. This is using the same technique, only with 16 different images to noise average. So I think this one, I worked it out. It has the same, even though it was shot at ISO 3200, it has about the same level of noise as one shot at ISO 100. It's just an old combine that was running that night, and I was just praying the farmer decided to hang it up early, and so I could go out there and shoot this scene. But yeah, this is one of my favorites.
So you kept the tripod in the very same spot?
Yeah.
And just multiple exposures?
Yeah.
That you worked with back home on the computer?
Yeah. What happens is that in each exposure, the Milky Way appeared to move a little bit more to the left. So what I did whenever I was recombining them, I made one master mask, the foreground and the combine, and took that out of every image, and then went back through and manually realigned all the images of the sky, and then converted them to a smart object, and then had that run as a stack with what's known as a median filter. Yeah. Anyway, somebody asked, so that's what I did. Yeah. It's this one took a lot of time to put together. Thanks. This is a single exposure. This is last November's supermoon. Not many stars here, of course. This was taken about maybe 15 minutes after it rose. There's an old dead walnut tree out in this field that's in the bottoms. It's probably been dead for longer than I've been walking the earth. But this night I was shooting the moon, or so to speak, and I got lucky when this flock of Canada geese flew through the scene. So sometimes you just get lucky, I guess. But here's the same tree, only with some star trails coming around it. And this one was shot over many exposures as well, just from the same location. But what I did here was, since shooting one really long exposure for star trails can be kind of a gamble. I mean, if you're in this case, I actually left my camera running out in the field, and I went back to the house and had a beer. Well, I let it run over the course of about 2.5 hours. And I just made it up of, I think it was 45 or so separate exposures, and then stacked them all in Photoshop and set the blend mode to light, and then it gave the appearance of star trails.
Wow. So
this one, even though it was made up of a lot of frames, was actually really easy to put together. This was shot down at kind of an infamous intersection in the bottoms. It seems like every time the river gets out, usually somebody gets swept off the road here, which is kind of interesting because there's a big stick that tells you exactly how deep it gets. Every year somebody, I'm not going to pick on Dodge drivers, but it usually is somebody in a Dodge pickup. That winds up going through there and getting swept off into those cottonwoods on the side of the road. But thankfully, I've never heard anybody actually getting injured doing it, but it's a pretty bad spot. Anyway, this was shot as a square format, so I think it was shot at a 40mm focal length. Basically just took 4 exposures to make up each quadrant of the image and then stitched them all together digitally. But I shot it around ISO 8000 just to bring out more shadow detail. One thing you'll find whenever you go to boosting shadows in Lightroom is that a lot of times you'll wind up introducing more noise by shadow boosting. shot at a low ISO than you will by shooting at a high ISO in the first place. There's a couple cameras that are a bit exceptions to this, but I don't own one of them, and I don't have any experience using them. Another deep sky image. These are the Pleiades and the California Nebula. Just shot in my backyard one night at a focal length of around 70 millimeters, aperture of f4. I was kind of disappointed in this one. There's actually a really neat section of intergalactic dust in between these two objects that looks really pretty in a photograph. And I didn't take near enough subframes to bring any of that out convincingly. So, and I want to say I've got around 2.5 hours of exposure time for this scene. I probably needed to get something in the magnitude of 8 to do what I needed to do.
That's a lot of beer.
It's a lot of beer. All right, another fairly simple scene here. This was shot on Indian Creek, just literally right there at the side of the road back in late February this year. It's around sunset. You can see the planet Venus as that bright dot just to the left of that tall cottonwood. And then you can't really see it very well unless maybe you're Dr. Calhoun here up front. You can see the planet Mars a bit up into the left bit. But this scene was captured in one exposure. It was shot at, I think I stopped way down to f8 for this one. It's 5 seconds just so I can kind of smooth the water out a little bit. And then for the first 2 seconds of the exposure, I actually held a little glass fog filter in front of my camera lens. And then for the last 2 seconds, I pulled it away. So that kind of gives it this real hazy, kind of dreamy effect and causes that star to bloat a little bit, or the planet Venus to bloat a bit. And that kind of makes it more easy to identify. And a bit of more shameless self-promotion. This is what I sold the Marauder to buy. This is our grocery getter and child carrier. I shot this in the bottoms one evening, just towards the end of the winter. This is another one, kind of like the Combine picture, where I had the camera held in one spot and took many, many exposures so I could get enough detail to bring out the nebulosity up in the sky, which I see now is wasted on this projector. Doesn't show up very well here at all here. But, they were all, I think I had 30 20-second exposures with a 14 millimeter lens, f2.8 ISO 1600.
What's the light then with the car?
Oh, it's a cell phone.
Oh.
Yeah, we don't have ground effects lighting. Another one that did pretty well is the constellation Orion over Lake Ditch. And a couple slides ago I talked about using a fog filter to kind of bloat the star a bit to make it more apparent. And in this case, if you've got really high clouds that are thin, they do the same thing. And the added bonus is you also get some really nice cloud effects in your scene. So, this image was actually shot wide open. It was a 24 millimeter lens at f1.4, ISO 810 seconds. They were a local excavating company was doing some drainage tile work, sort out by Rose Acres, and one night I waited for them to leave the job site, and I just went down there and did my thing. So I was able to get away with using the faster lens in this case, or the faster aperture in this case. One, I didn't want a lot of cloud movement in the scene, and two, on this particular lens, most of the star distortion happens sort of at the fringes of it, and so you can see here there's foreground taking up that kind of space, and I probably cropped it out of the top. But the reason that stars actually do kind of distort a little bit is because of the wider apertures, light enters the sensor at sort of unusual angles and causes some stars to look more like strings or seagulls in some cases. But this one you might recognize from the county fair. I got first place in the antique building with this shot. It was just a small John Deere tractor that Plumber's Hay Farm uses for hauling a hay rake, and got the moon above it. And again, this is actually a 2-image exposure, because no matter how hard I tried, I could not, even though there was good light on the scene, I could never get it in one take where I had detail in the moon and then also enough shadow detail in the tractor. So what I did here was I just digitally erased the moon from the scene, kept all the surrounding light, and then took a separate exposure of the moon with the same lens and put it back in. So I guess this is about as true a fake as you can get. All right, and then to wrap things up, this is a 42-image panorama spanning 210 degrees of the sky, shot over Indian Creek in one night. There's not a lot of shadow detail that shows up here on the projector, but this one took a lot of work. And yes, yeah. So I kind of like it here. How you sort of had this point of rotation around this bright blob that's light pollution from Seymour, Indiana, with the arc of the Milky Way, and then right here, as the ditch makes a bend, it sort of mirrors it a bit on the ground. The object, or the ATV you see in the foreground, is actually my brother's Polaris Ranger that I used to get out here, because this site's quite a bit off the beaten path. I just wasn't going to walk 2 miles back there to get the scene.
You didn't want to walk 2 miles?
Yeah. Well, let me say, I didn't want to walk 2 miles at 10:30 at night to get the scene. Okay. I do actually have one more. This is Schneck. Part of my day job, or so to speak, actually involves going in about 3 o'clock in the morning to take care of trees and shrubs at the hospitals, or the hospital and a few area businesses. Actually, they don't want me spraying while people are on site. So one morning I shot this panorama. It was 7 images to get the foreground, and that was it. And then I actually took the night sky panorama about 4 miles west of town, and pretty simple swap. Again, this is something that could be seen were it not for light pollution. Actually tried selling this one to Schneck, and yeah, no dice. So yeah, you win some, you lose some, I guess. All right, so questions?
So obviously before digital photography and Photoshop, you couldn't take these kind of pictures.
Yeah, you could do it. It was just a lot more difficult.
Really?
Yeah, a whole lot more trial and error, and you may have to shoot the same scene many times over and over again to get the same results. Just obviously, you couldn't inspect your film negatives through the catch on a film camera, so you just try a number of different things, different focal points, and of course, used to be on a lens, if you set your focus to infinity, the hard infinity stop, it was focused to infinity. With the advent of digital cameras, for a number of reasons, it's actually a bit before infinity, and it changes with temperature and humidity and things like that. But back in the film days, it was all trial and error, and really you were kind of limited to, I don't know, I want to say the fastest slide film I ever saw was around 3200 ASA. But it could be done. It was just more difficult. And there were some darkroom techniques you could use to bring out more detail, just with different chemicals and dodging and burning and whatnot. But it could be done. It was just a lot more time consuming. Not that it isn't time consuming now.
So, what's your computer program that you use to?
Well, I use a couple of them for probably 98% of everything. I start my processing in a program called Adobe Lightroom.
Adobe Lightroom.
Yeah, Adobe Lightroom, and then I finish out in Photoshop CC. But when I first got started, I actually did virtually everything in Photoshop Elements 11, which for a beginner is plenty enough program, and also several magnitudes less expensive.
You said Adobe Lightroom and then Photoshop Elements 11, and then what was the
Photoshop CC. Yeah, the version I use is 2017. And I like using Photoshop CC. The problem with it is that it's kind of subscription based, so every year they send you a reminder that you owe them $112.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Was still but the upgrades don't cost anything. I think if you do the math, it's still cheaper to buy it by subscription than it was to buy the old Photoshop CS6 outright. I want to say you'd spend something like $4,000 on Photoshop before the new version came out each time, and you spend quite a bit less than that if you get all the updates.
So when you take the picture, then can you tell, how do you know, oh, I got 20 shots of this, that should be enough, or?
Some of it's trial and error. There's some internet guides that kind of give you approximations to how many exposures you need for a different subject, and all of this changes with the amount of light pollution you have and just the atmospheric conditions. Like problems with noise tend to be a bit exacerbated under really humid skies. And conversely, if you go out and shoot on a night when it's about 0 degrees, you can get away with shooting really high ISOs and having virtually little signal noise. Like, I want to say that whenever I'm shooting on a cold January night at ISO 3200, it looks about the same as ISO 400 does in the summertime. So, pretty significant difference.
Yeah.
And there's actually some tricks you can do with your cameras with cooling the sensor to produce the same effect, but again, getting kind of above and beyond the scope of this.
So what would you suggest that, like on the news that I look at on the internet as a beginner to,
Get started?
yeah.
There's a really good website out there called lonelyspec.com.
Lonely?
Yeah, lonelyspec.com, LONELYSPECK. It's run by a guy named Ian Norman. He's actually based out of Los Angeles. He's an electrical engineer by occupation, but he does a really good job of putting things in plain English. And he has good videos to go along with a lot of his stuff.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Have you been out to, like, out west anywhere and done some photography?
No, I was out there in 2009. Me and some friends took a canoe trip down the Green River through southeast Utah, about a 75-mile stretch. Unfortunately, the only camera I had back then was a point and shoot, and I had no tripod or really any idea how to do this.
So, do you think your wife might let you do that someday?
Well, is she still in here?
No, she left.
Yes, absolutely.
I was hoping she was still sitting there when I said that, so I put her on the spot.
Yeah.
Where would you like to go out? In what area?
If I could go out there again, I'd probably like to shoot Arches National Park. Yosemite would be a good one. Probably what I would most like to shoot, though, would be the area around Horseshoe Bend on the Green River. Just because I just remember being out there that night. I swear the Milky Way cast a shadow. You're 100 miles away from the nearest town. The nearest town is the size of Brownstown. So,
Wow.
yeah, just
The Milky Way looks like clouds up there.
it does. It's phenomenal. What you see in my photographs taken here in Seymour, Indiana, and Bartholomew County are about what it looks like to the naked eye out there. So you can imagine the difference in quality you get by just being in better skies.
We were up in Michigan just this summer, and we went to a dark sky park.
Yeah.
And that was phenomenal. I mean, it was just like you're saying, what you see with the naked eye was incredible. Now, we didn't get any good pictures, though. But, yeah, it was nice.
Yep. It seemed like in college there was a dark sky site I went to in Indiana. I want to say on the scale it was like a 2. But that was, I want to say, an hour south of Lafayette. It was in some observatory, but it wasn't near like some of these, like.
Yeah, this is in the Upper Peninsula
Yeah.
kind of thing. It was really
That's
nice.
right. Yeah. Beautiful area, by the way.
Yeah, it was.
Traveled up there a few times, again, before I really had a camera, so. All right, so about out of time. Is there any last questions? All right then.
Thanks.
Good,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
now, good evening.